Lose your tour group, Grandpa? Or are you here to entertain us? The taunt sliced through the icy wind, sharp and mocking. Sergeant Miller stood with his hands planted on his hips, a smug grin curling on his face as his breath drifted in white clouds into the cold mountain air. Beside him, a young private let out a snicker, the sound quickly swallowed by the vast, frozen landscape. Arnold Benetati, 2 years old, remained unmoved. He didn't flinch, didn't respond, didn't even look their way. Standing alone in his bright red ski jacket, he seemed almost out of place among the squad of U.S. Army Rangers, outfitted in full winter combat gear. His gloved hands rested steadily on the worn grips of his ski poles, his eyes fixed on the distant jagged peaks, clawing at the gray sky. He seemed less like a man and more like part of the mountain itself, ancient, steady, and untouched by the chaos around him. Captain Evans, the unit's commanding officer, watched from a short distance away, mild amusement flickering in his eyes. At least it was something different, a brief break from the monotony of high-altitude training. "Sir, you're in a restricted military zone," Evans called out, his tone professional but unmistakably dismissive. "I need to know who you are and what you're doing up here." The wind howled across the ridge, blasting the soldiers with fine needles of icy snow. The young Rangers bristled with energy-coiled springs and cutting-edge winter camouflage, rifles at the ready. They were the Army's elite, the sharpened tip of the spear. And standing in their path was one elderly man in a bright red jacket. The imbalance would have been funny if the tension hadn't been so real. Miller, emboldened by the captain's silent approval, stepped forward. His smirk hardened into a sneer. "This isn't a public park. Old man, this is Army territory. You're a security threat. Show me some ID, now." Arnold finally shifted his gaze from the horizon. He looked directly at Miller, his eyes, a pale, icy blue. There was no fear in them, no irritation, only a deep, steady calm that rattled the sergeant more than anger ever could. Slowly, deliberately, Arnold reached into the zippered pocket of his jacket. The Rangers tensed instantly. A ripple of alertness passed through the squad. Hands tightened around weapons. Eyes narrowed. They'd been trained to expect anything in remote mountain passes. Arnold's movements were slow, stiff from the cold. He pulled out a worn leather wallet, cracked and smoothed from decades of use, clearly something from another lifetime. Miller barked a sharp laugh. "What's in there, Grandpa?" "Your bingo punch card, a shuffleboard membership." The Rangers shifted impatiently. The cold was sinking into their bones, fraying tempers and eroding patience. They were supposed to be running drills, pushing their limits, not babysitting an old man who'd wandered into their exercise. "All right, that's enough, Miller," Captain Evans snapped, stepping forward. His patience had finally run out. He turned to Arnold, the word "sir" now sounding stiff and forced. "Sir, I don't know how you ended up here, but you're coming with us. We're escorting you down the mountain until we figure out what's going on." He motioned for 2 Rangers to move in. The message was clear. Arnold could cooperate or be taken. The tension that had been simmering now surged to a boil. The wind whipped around them, a physical echo of the standoff. The circle of armed soldiers tightened around the lone elderly man. Arnold looked at the captain, then at the Rangers approaching him. When he finally spoke, his voice wasn't loud, but it carried a gravelly, unshakable weight that cut straight through the wind. "I'm not going anywhere." The words froze the entire squad. Miller's jaw clenched in disbelief. Who did this old man think he was deafening? Trained Army Rangers on a freezing mountain. For Captain Evans, this was the final insult, a direct challenge to his authority in front of his unit. Whatever amusement he'd had earlier vanished, replaced by cold fury. This little distraction had turned into an act of open defiance. He would make an example of this stubborn old man. Arnold's thumb brushed over a faded insignia pressed into the Wallaton almost invisible winged dagger. Worn by time, for a split second, the snowy ridge vanished, replaced by a nightmare landscape, the frozen hell of the chosen reservoir. He was 20 again, lying in a blood-soaked ditch, the cold gnawing at him like a beast. A young corporal beside him, Donnie from Ohio, struggled to breathe. Each exhale a pink-tinged cloud. Danny pressed his own wallet into Arnold's hand. The leather was new then. "Don't let them forget us, Airy," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Promise me." The vision faded as quickly as it had come. A flicker of pain and iron resolve flashed through Arnold's eyes, too fleeting for any of the Rangers to notice. To them, he was just a stubborn old man about to be forced into compliance. A few hundred meters away, Specialist Davis watched from a rocky outcrop, cold but tense for entirely different reasons. His spotting scope tracked every movement. At first, he'd thought nothing of it, a lost hiker being lectured. But as the situation escalated, unease tightened in his gut. He zoomed in on the man's face. No fear, no confusion, just calm to calm. The Rangers, on the other hand, taunts, smirks, and Evans doing nothing to stop it. This wasn't protocol. This was hazing, and it was spiraling. Davis captured more audio with his long-range mic. Demand for ID. Quiet refusal. Miller pulling out zip-tie cuffs. This wasn't right. Not at all. Every instinct screamed that this old man wasn't just some clueless civilian. Not with that posture, that presence, that unshakable. He couldn't break radio silence on the primary channel, or Evans would have his hide. But he did have a secure line to the command post at the mountain's base. With numb fingers, he switched frequencies. Command, this is Observation Post Alpha. He whispered, we have a situation at Grid 7 Delta. Captain Evans's unit is detaining a civilian. Something's off. Requesting a name check. Civilian's name is Bennett. Arnold Bennett. He described the man briefly. Age, appearance, the red jacket. A pause. Copy. Alpha, stand by. Davis kept his scope trained as Miller advanced with cuffs. Evans's face was tight with anger. Davis held his breath. At the base's operations center, a bored young sergeant typed the name into the system. Bennett, Arnold. He expected nothing, maybe a missing person. Some elderly tourist with memory issues. The screen blinked, then exploded in bright red. Access denied. File classification. Eyes only. 06 and above. The sergeant shot upright. Adrenaline surging. He had never seen clearance that high. A colonel's level or above. Hands shaking. He used a supervisor override, not enough to view the full file, but enough to pull the summary. The moment the page loaded, his blood ran cold. He leaped from his chair so fast it toppled backward and slammed into the equipment. Colonel, he shouted, voice cracking. Sir, you need to see this now. Sir, you need to see this. Colonel Hayes, commander of the exercise, was a man shaped by discipline and impatience. He was in the middle of a briefing, irritation already brewing on his face as he turned toward the interruption. This had better be important. Sergeant, the sergeant couldn't speak. He only pointed at the screen with a trembling hand. Hayes stepped closer, scanning the text. The annoyance faded instantly, replaced with shock. His usually weathered, cold-reddened face drained of color. He reread the file summary, mouth moving silently. Then the panic hit. Get me a bird in the air now, he roared, shaking the entire command tent. Launch the command and control Blackhawk and get General Masters on the SATCOM. Move. He spun back to the sergeant, eyes wide with disbelief. My God, do they have any idea who they're talking to? Meanwhile, back on the ridge, Captain Evans had lost his patience. Arnold Bennett's.com refusal to cooperate felt like a direct insult to his authority. I'm done with this. Evans snapped, voice as sharp as the icy wind. You're in a restricted zone. You won't identify yourself. You've ignored a lawful order from a U.S. Army officer. Miller, cuff him. Sergeant Miller's cruel grin returned. With pleasure, sir. He approached with zip ties dangling from his hand. You did this to yourself, old man. You're going down this mountain in cuffs, and you'll be explaining yourself from a tiny room. Maybe you need a psych eval while we're at it. It was the final insult, threatening restraint in mocking his sanity. Miller reached for Arnold's arm. Arnold Bennett finally spoke. His voice was low, not loud, but it carried a weight that stunned Miller mid-step. Son. Arnold said, staring straight into Miller's eyes. You really don't want to do that. Asterisk, as if the air itself responded. A new sound broke through the wind. Thump, thump, thump. Every ranger on the ridge recognized it instantly. A helicopter. But this one was different. The rhythm grew louder, too fast, too close. A UH-60 Blackhawk burst over the nearest ridge, flying dangerously low. Snow exploded in every direction under its rotor wash. This wasn't their transport helicopter. This was the command and control aircraft. Colonel Hayes's personal bird, and another Blackhawk followed right behind it. The helicopters hovered only 50 feet overhead, blasting the Rangers with icy wind. Ropes dropped from the doors. At the same time, two snow camo tactical vehicles barreled up the trail below. This wasn't normal. This was a high-level emergency response, something reserved for generals. Not lost elderly men. Captain Evans felt his stomach drop. He knew instantly he'd made the biggest mistake of his career. The first man to slide down the rope was Colonel Hayes himself, hitting the snow at a run. His command sergeant major followed seconds later. Hayes didn't look at Evans. He didn't look at any of the Rangers. He pushed through the snow with a singular purpose. He stopped 3 feet from Arnold Bennett. Despite the chaos around them, Hayes stood tall and snapped the sharpest salute Evans had ever seen. Sir, his voice boomed. Colonel Hayes, 75th Ranger Regiment, I apologize for my men. We did not know you were present. It is an honor, sir. Miller's jaw dropped. Evans went pale. The squad stared in disbelief. Sir. Honor. For him. The command sergeant major stepped forward. His voice was steady, reverentry citing a service record from memory. Arnold Bennett, enlisted, United States Army, 1950. First combat jump with the 187th Airborne in Korea. Fought at Suncheon and Muwanenai, names that lived in Ranger history books. Founding member of the 10th Special Forces Group, 1952. One of the original quiet professionals. 5 combat tours with MAC-VSOG in Vietnam. A ripple of shock moved through the Rangers. SOG operators were legends, almost myth. Recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, 3 Silver Stars, 4 Bronze Stars, with Valor, 5 Purple Hearts. Then the final blow, awarded the Medal of Honor for actions on November 19, 1967. During the Battle of Dactuo, citation remains classified. Silence consumed the ridge. They hadn't just disrespected a veteran, they had threatened a living legend, a man who helped build the very legacy they trained under. Hayes lowered his salute, then slowly faced Captain Evans. His voice was calm, but deadly. Captain, you are here to learn about respect and judgment. You failed catastrophically. You mistook a giant for a tourist. You allowed your men to insult a cornerstone of this regiment. Report to my command post at 18 o'clock. You will give me one reason why I shouldn't end your career tonight. He turned to Miller. Sergeant, you will spend the next month on every miserable detail this base has. In your free time, you will handwrite reports on every Medal of Honor recipient from the Korean War. Learn that courage, not a uniform, defines a man. The punishment was brutal, precise, and deserved. Arnold stepped forward and gently placed a hand on the colonel's arm. Colonel, they're young, he said softly, full of fire. We need that. They just don't know where to aim it yet. He faced Evans and Miller. His eyes held no anger, only deep-earned wisdom. Rank isn't your stripes or your bars. It's what you've endured. The men you saved on, the ones you couldn't. That's the only rank that matters. He opened his worn wallet. Inside was a faded, folded piece of paper, a letter a dying friend had begged him to deliver during the Korean War. This, Arnold said quietly, is a promise. A reminder that everyone carries something heavy. You owe respect to each person you meet, because you don't know what ghosts they carry. The story spread quickly through the special operations world. Evans's unit was pulled from the exercise. A new mandatory training block was added, focusing on forgotten heroes like Bennett. Weeks later, in a small diner at the base of the mountain, Arnold Bennett sat sipping black coffee. The door chimed. Sergeant Miller walked in, hesitant but determined. Sir, he said quietly, I wanted to apologize. Truly. Arnold smiled kindly and motioned to the stool next to him. Sit down, son. He ordered Miller a coffee. After a long, reflective silence, Arnold spoke. That fire in you, your edge, has its place. It can keep you alive, but you have to temper it with wisdom. He looked at Miller, his pale blue eyes steady. You learned some wisdom on that mountain. Don't waste it. They drank their coffee together, an old warrior and a young one, a passing of understanding between generations. When Arnold stood to leave, he dropped a $5 bill on the counter. Miller quietly added a 20 beside it, shoulders squared as he walked out, a changed man.